that brings to the question, is it possible for humans to ever understand this divide at all?
Yeah.
And I just don't know what everyone will think about that.
Yeah. I think a lot of philosophers, they make this chasm, and they're at a loss to how to bridge it. So what do you guys think? Is there a solution to this, or are we just kind of got to stick with two unsatisfactory ideas of knowledge, or we got to pick one?
I would say that at least one way to look at it, you can make Berkeley not a skeptic, because we have this is a dualistic outlook,
Right.
and so it's like sort of essentially Cartesian. If you have a dualistic outlook, you can sort of get out of this by either being a materialist or an idealist, and Berkeley picking idealism sort of implies that he took this problem and picked one side, which sort of identifies him as not eventually being a skeptic. And then obviously the other way of doing it is sort of reducing mental states to material states, which would be one solution for this as well, but no one particularly does.
Yeah, but even then, I think that rather than a solution to the problem, those are examples of people picking a side and still having this gap, because the idealists, they still have this, well, this is called relations of ideas. It's also, a priori, in some cases, analytic. There's, philosophers make fine distinctions between some of these terms, but we can speak really broadly that these kinds of knowledge, these are the ones that really matter for rationalists, idealists. But they seem, in some sense, what I'm suggesting, that they're not a solution to the problem, because in some sense they're unsatisfactory to say it's all in our head or the table's not really there. It runs counter to common sense, and it's not, I don't know a better way to say it, it just doesn't seem as satisfactory.
If we doubt the table there, how do we not doubt ourselves being here and in our mind? Like, where does the doubt end?
Exactly, yeah.
It brings up the mind-body dualism.
It seems to me that the real skepticism comes up not just when they're skeptical about the material world, but rather when they're skeptical about our ability to predict the future at all.
Yeah.
Okay. And at that point, you'd almost have to say, thank God they're wrong so far.
Yeah.
So, in other words, we have been able to predict, and we do make predictions, and we rely upon our prediction-making power.
Yeah.
Experiments are designed to buttress that and support that.
Yeah.
And it's very important that we have that anxiety relieving thing going on of being able to predict, at least to some extent, what's going to happen next. And what Hume really gets, where his skepticism really gets radical, is when he suggests that at any moment in time, the universe could become totally chaotic and unpredictable.
Right. Just,
okay.
You drop a beach ball, it starts emitting music like a radio, and it's like, just the road turns into snakes, just nonsense.
I have one question. How do they account for pain? Like, if there's no real objects, what if, we're sensing something hitting us?
Yeah.
We feel pain.
How could we even
happen? And what's their
God makes it happen.
Yeah, Berkeley would say God makes it happen, but you raised,
God is a compass for every murder.
Your last two.
I thought that was all good though, so then God is bad too?
There's your last two questions are really good. Like, could you really doubt yourself? And certain kinds of experiences we have, like pain, are those even doubtable? Does that make any sense to even doubt? And that's sort of, there's a line of philosophers who sort of follow those kind of questions from this split, like phenomenologists and other sort of continental kind of philosophers, who want to say something like, if I'm experiencing pain, there's no, and that's what it means to be in pain, is to experience pain. So that's the real deal. So, and that's similar to what Descartes is saying when he's saying, if I'm doubting, I'm doubting. There's a me there. I have questions about the validity of that kind of reasoning. I mean, if you're getting to that point where you're even questioning, I think you probably made a mistake somewhere along the line. James, what?
Pain is only a transient sensation, though. You experience it and you remember the experience of it, but the pain isn't you and it doesn't stay with you.
That's a good point.
Only the memory of it.
Right. And Hume, when he's talking about what is the I, it's not in this the stuff I drew for this presentation, but some people like Locke say that there's like an I, and Descartes says there's like an I. There's like a personhood or an identity or something at the base of all these experiences, that all these experiences are happening in or of.
And it's at least substantial for Descartes.
Right.
Yeah.
And Hume says, I don't know, all I see is those experiences and stuff. I don't know what people are talking about when they say the I.
Well, that's
Yes,
kind of a
and that's,
problem.
yeah.
Well, what is the I? Is the
Yeah.
I your unconscious? Is it your conscious? Is it just what I see and feel and touch?
Well,
Is
the-
the
I think it's
process-
content phenomenologists have multiple eyes, you know.
Yeah, there's, I mean, it's an interesting question, and your answer to that question depends a lot on your kind of epistemology and your metaphysics and what it is that you think. It's like, there's a common sense understanding where it's like, well, it's me. You know, I'm this body and I'm this mind. You know, it's, what are you talking about? What am I? I'm the thing that's talking now. I'm the guy that's walking around.
I took a lot of dissociative drugs.
Yeah, but that's an instance where it's not the person's not functioning normally. Like, there's all kinds of things you could say about hallucinations and psychosis and people on drugs and stuff, but I don't think those are philosophically important, because those aren't people functioning normally. That's when there's something wrong.
But you can, even in normal experiences, like distance yourself enough from what you're going through to regard it with interest and try to focus in on what it is. So, for example, in the morning sometimes I'm standing in the shower and I turn from hot water to cold water, and I'm dreading it.
Right.
And when it first happens, it's actually somewhat painful. But then I start looking at it and saying, "Oh, that's interesting." And
Yeah.
and-
You can.
and
There's
I can kind of stand back from it and watch
Right.
it. And if I find it interesting, it's no longer painful.
Yeah, there's it's an interesting phenomenon. I was one thing, and I'll go to Joey then Pio. On that note, there's one of my favorite movies is Lawrence of Arabia, and Lawrence of Arabia is a tough bastard in this movie, and he puts up a lot of stuff in the desert. And another British guy comes in the desert. He's like, "How do you do it? How do you deal with the pain?" Lawrence of Arabia takes a cigarette, and he puts it out on his hand. The other guy goes, "Doesn't that hurt?" He goes, "Well, of course it hurts. The trick is not caring that it hurts."
About sort of Hume's issue with identity and everything, he can say that there isn't any sort of substance that these experiences reside in, and still retain an I, because each experience can contain this concept of an I itself, which will which will sort of map it to the other experiences. And so within the experiences, you can't say that each one is actually substantially or metaphysically connected to all the other ones in some real person, but the way the experiences are from inside connect to all the other ones.
Right. And that's it's a really interesting line of philosophy. Like, what is the I? And if it's if it's all the experiences, then what is it that holds them all together? And if it's not the experiences, then it seems to be contentless. So it's interesting. James and Pio. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to be honest here. Pio first, because I said so, and then James.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, you basically said that hallucinations, being under the influence of drugs, those are abnormalities. They're of no significance to philosophers, but they are. But they are pretty much to a great degree, specifically since something happens. Something of a more or less either causal connection and it is, of course, an experience.
Yeah.
And even though this experience stands out from the norm, but what is the norm even?
I think that's a good point. It does.
Yeah,
When I said that they weren't important philosophically, I didn't mean that we couldn't learn anything really important from them. I think that they can tell us, neuroscience generally, probably I think will have a lot to tell us about, the nature of consciousness and stuff like that once we understand it a lot better. And the fact that injuries and drugs, things that affect the brain, affect consciousness, tells us something philosophically important. When I say it's not philosophically important, my point is that we shouldn't take madmen and mentally disabled people and people with brain damage as the normal when we're making our philosophical abstractions, because that doesn't tell us anything as interesting or useful to normally functioning human adults.
Nevertheless,
I'm sorry, James.
I feel precisely the opposite way about that. I think it tells you an enormous amount about normal human perceptions, but in a somewhat circumspect way. Consider, for example, a schizophrenic or somebody who maybe has extra sensory perception very frequently and doesn't. It's a fine line. You have these perceptions, and the light bounces off the table and it goes back to your eyes. But then, in turn, the brain is subbing in something else. So the electrical signals come back to your brain decodes them, and it adds wholly new sensory perceptions, which clearly aren't coming from the light. They clearly aren't coming from the table. They aren't coming from the light bouncing off the table. But they become intermeshed with this reality to the person experiencing it intrinsically. Now, I certainly wouldn't say that particularly invalidates the reality of the table.
Right.
But it does say something about the way that the human perceptory system functions intrinsically.
Yeah.
That it's almost made to sub things in.
Yeah, I think that's to the extent that we can learn really important things about normal functioning, about how it is that we perceive the world. Those kinds of cases are incredibly important. And even in the case of a normal person, there are times when our perceptions seem to be confusing us, and it's those that I think we can learn a lot about perception from also, because it's the contrast between, well, we normally take our perceptions to be completely reliable, and it's those times where they seem like they're not that cause us to wonder about the nature of perception itself. There's an example, a very common example of, imagine you've got like this glass of water, and there's a stick in it, and it looks like the stick is broken, right? And when you're looking at it, it's because of the way light moves through the water, but your perceptions are telling you the stick goes in here and then just it's over here. And it seems to be like an optical illusion or something like that. What I think this tells us about perception is in fact the opposite of the normal conclusion drawn from this. I think it tells us that our eyes can't lie to us. There is a fact about the water, and there's a fact about the way light interacts with the water that our eyes can't overcome. And that's how we learn that kind of stuff. That's my take on that.
But could there be perception